Hey guys, it's Drake again with the RPG Construct. So, wanted to do a video because I have another Dragon Grin game coming up in 2 weeks, and we did a session 0 earlier in the week. Random roll, race, class, alignment, background, trinkets, even their flaws, just to kind of push the players a little bit with their RPG, their RPing flexibility, and I decided I kind of came up with a backstory that everything in Dragon Grin, it can't be always good versus evil, because there's not all that much good left after the Dismembered Lord took over, right? So I thought, why not fight evil with evil? Sometimes if there's no other hope, that's what you got to do. Utilize the resources at your disposal, right? So I was thinking, in that game, Tim Carney jumped in for about 45 minutes and gave us a bunch of lore with regards to more stuff about Dragon Grin that we didn't know, namely the Sphere Mountains, not the Sphere Below, not Deep Vault, not all the stuff we already have stuff on, information on. This is above, like the actual mountains, and he talks about things like the Mountain Elves. And more of a martial race versus the kind of graceful, magical elves that we all think of. So a little bit different there. And he talked about the sphere being very undead heavy. He described it as basically take the setting of I think he said Ravenloft and just plop it in the middle of the mountains, and that is what the sphere is. And I was going to have an undead game anyway, so it kind of worked. But he described different kinds of undead, not so much your typical ghosts and ghasts and vampires and zombies, not like that. The imminence magic has kind of warped things, so they're slightly different. We're going to see a lot more of that with the Dead Man's God, Dragon Grin, and all that stuff. But for now, it's really just kind of up to whoever's running the game. The one really cool thing that Tim said, that all the guys have said, is, these settings, their setting is going to be different than mine. Tim's Dragon Grin is going to be different than my Dragon Grin, and that's perfectly okay. My Dragon Grin is not any less important than his. So, with coming and doing that, I thought, well, I have to come up with something where these guys are going to start. Where, typical, you're going to start in a tavern, a city, something like that. Unless you see Crux, and then people start in different areas. But I thought of a city, right? And I thought that I would name it Grinus, because it's Grin and Innis together with the Sphere Mountains in the middle there. But I thought that its nickname could be Sanctuary. I thought that would be really cool, that, people fleeing Grin, if they got here, they could get over to Innis and maybe start a new life, or, it's kind of like the Underground Railroad type idea. Big walled city, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what I found myself doing is I was just thinking about this and kind of writing notes. Before I realized it, I was 3 or 4 pages in to describing a city. I was into the leadership and the military and how it was created, and even how they got the walls up, and if this is so bad. And what I realized was something that I had watched in another video, that we all get carried away. We try to figure out every little aspect of our setting, and then I thought to myself, do my players give a shit? They don't, and they won't. I can certainly flesh out the city for myself, but does it matter, how it was built for the particulars of this game? No, it doesn't. Does it matter who's in the leadership? Probably not for this game. Does it matter who walks the walls or anything like that? Not really. The specifics of the city are not that important for the purposes of this game. But I spent probably an hour and a half looking at this, and writing pages of lore about the city that don't matter. And so I went back and I rewatched on the channel Be a Better Game Master. I watched Barker's creative or something about productivity, and anyway, he was talking about barkstorming, planning, and all that stuff is what he was doing. Part 2. It's the 11-minute one. If you haven't checked it out, you need to check that out. It's very helpful. So I tried to think what was relevant to this game, and I got my little index card out. I don't know if you can see that. It says Grinnis and Sanctuary. I got my one piece of paper, and I was just kind of coming up with what, kind of trying to focus on this one thing and what's going to be pertinent to this game. I know it's going to be a large walled city, and I had to stop myself from going, well, if it's a large walled city and there's a lot of people in it, well, we have to talk about the supply chains and how they get their stuff and all this other stuff. And again, it is so hard, and I'm sure all of us feel this. It is so hard to just say it's a large walled city. The walls protect everybody inside from what's outside. Tim had described these types of cities as, if anyone was tossed out for bad behavior or whatever reason, it was pretty much a death sentence. As long as they could survive, they survived. But it was pretty much a death sentence if you were put outside the walls. And I think that's really the only pertinent thing. The only pertinent thing to this giant city that we could write stories upon stories upon stories about is that there's walls that protect you, and if you go outside, you're probably going to die. And that's the chunk. That's the chunk that's pertinent to my players. That's it. Not the pages upon pages that I could write about the city, but the fact that there's a city, it's safe inside the city. Outside the city is pretty much a death sentence, and people are scared to do it. People don't want to go out there. You can certainly tie it in and twist it however you want, but for the purposes of this, it doesn't matter. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think it was Brian Barber or Ben Fisher, I forget who it was. Somebody posted about how do you condense things, and I think that's the trick. When you're prepping for a game, I don't do a lot of prep at all. But I do like to know the landmarks and everything like that. But between the points, I pretty much let the players go. But with that, I just thought, if I didn't remember Barker's advice, Barker's video, I would probably still be writing 2.5 hours later. So again, just something to think about when you're doing this prep and lore and stuff like that. Pretty much my prep for that city is 2 lines. I don't even need the index card, Barker. Nothing at all. So, it was a pretty interesting prep / lack of prep. And, I think the city is going to be pretty awesome. And there's going to be a lot of things I think that could happen in there, and the possibilities are endless. But at the same time, knowing that my characters or my players won't care. They'll have their job to do. They'll be in there, but nothing's really going to happen in the city. So why take the time in your prep to go through it when most of us are creative enough that if something goes down in the city, you can just improv it. So just a thought. And if you haven't checked out that video, you need to check it out. That's just one little thing in the game. I'm going to post a couple more prep videos, but it was just one thing that hit me, and it saved me probably a couple hours of writing, and probably saved my players from a whole lot of unnecessary information to confuse them. So again, man, just something to think about. So this is Drake with the RPG Construct. Hope you all have a great day.